cultures blend. They kind of interconnect. Like when you get enough people, eventually everybody kind of shares things, and they appropriate each other's stuff. That's just the normal. It's not a, it's a human thing.
Like, what if this is just bigotry using buzzwords to mask itself as like social justice when it really just wants to keep that divide? Because that's all it's really doing is dividing.
My point was, before somebody, you, the viewers out there, start screaming about cultural appropriation, I would say distill it down to what the culture of Earth is first.
If you don't have that blending of culture, you get stagnation for one thing, but you also get division.
Here's the problem with defining culture is, what do you choose to include in the list of cultural traits, and what do you exclude, and why?
And I was culturally stepping on all kinds of shit, and they were not offended at all. They were like, oh, hey, just so you know, like, it's in our culture to accept food with both hands. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I just accepted food with both hands. They weren't like, you're a fucking dick, man. Another minute. Welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I haven't had beer already. What are you talking about? I'm Casey Rochford, and we'd love it if you'd like and share and subscribe to the channel because beer.
Yeah, beer. Australian for, well, I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and don't forget, we write our own music, and that's available on such places on the interwebs like iTunes and Spotify. You can go to KSM or patreon.com/KSM Vidcast. You can help out the channel and get some music and stuff. We got some swag you can pick up. Not on Patreon, but we got t-shirts and a mug. That's kind of
cool. And our new album just came out at the time of this airing, so go take a listen.
Yeah, we got tons of music, so stick around to the end of the show and you'll hear part of a new song, some of that music. You can check out our website at ksmvidcast.com. Got all kinds of cool stuff there, and I think that's it. So Casey, what kind of crazy ass thing are we going to be talking about today? And do I need more than one beer?
Well, probably, yeah, because I think it's been a while since we did a topic that really pisses people off. and well, maybe not, but yeah. It's one that, like, it shouldn't piss people off. I think people should really challenge themselves to like think about what it is that they feel. And one of the big things that I see as sort of a hypocrisy is the cultural appropriation idea, and especially in light of the acceptance of somebody identifying as a different gender than they were born as. So why is that okay, and it's not okay to identify as a different culture that you like, or that you feel comfortable in, like
or something you just simply appreciate or enjoy. I mean, it's one thing to do something in a mocking way, but it's another thing to do something in kind of a respective way, right? Like, yeah, you appreciate whatever it is, whatever culture it might be, and somehow the thing that kind of bugs me about the cultural appropriation thing is it kind of like seems to be the outrage seems to be very limited to people with darker skin, when cultures are very broad in spectrum. Like it's not a skin color thing.
No.
Cultures are all over the map, like people don't seem to have a problem with people getting all Irish on St. Patrick's Day or something, and kind of thing.
You're starting to see a bit of that though. Like it's, the cancel culture stuff, like all of that is slowly bleeding into pretty much everything. They've already been attacking Halloween costumes, like, Native American Halloween costumes with the feathers. And it's like, well, just because like one or two tribes used feathers and the others didn't, that's somehow offensive to all the other tribes.
Well, and I would ask people, have you seen Native American tribes today? They drive Audis. They live in regular cars. They use cell phones. Hardly anybody dresses like that except for ceremonial reasons. It's a very limited kind of thing. So
now, if you want to dress like a priest or a nun, I'm sure nobody bats an eye, but it's like, well, is that like, it's a huge Roman Catholic thing. So is that like culturally appropriating Rome or the Vatican? Like Vatican's culture, I guess, Catholicism.
Well, and cultures, this is the thing too. Cultures blend. They kind of interconnect. Like when you get enough people, eventually everybody kind of shares things and they appropriate each other's stuff. That's just the normal. It's a human thing. Yeah. Really, it's what people do. They absorb, like the Borg, a little bit of everything and kind of create their own new product out of that. And
when we were growing up, that was thought of as a good thing, the melting pot, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody kind of coming together, sharing a little bit of what is unique about them and where they come from. And, they partake of what, is meaningful to you and where you came from. And, you blend. And I think it's been called transculturation as well. Like you look around America, like America's full of transculturation. We're built on it. Like, nobody, including the Native Americans, nobody is from here. We all came here at some point.
That's true. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I would ask anybody who takes issue with quote unquote cultural appropriation, define culture. Tell me what culture is. And why is adopting someone else's norms, why is that a bad thing? Whether it be like food or clothing or mannerisms or language or whatever, why is that somehow harmful to people? And why should we have a problem with that? Because I don't see a problem with it. I think it's a good thing. Like you learn from other people. I mean, it's like sharing information is a good thing.
The word you used, adopt, is perfect. That's what it should be called, cultural adoption. Appropriation makes it sound like you're stealing it, like you're not allowed to share in that culture or partake in the customs or beliefs or clothing or hairstyles. I mean, the dreadlocks. People think dreadlocks are cultural appropriation. Vikings had them. The Irish had them. Like, there's a lot of different culture. Yeah. Like you're showing your own ignorance and bigotry, actually, when you think, hey, you're picking on X culture and no other culture, but other cultures do that too.
Well, and how about the fact that a lot of those cultures, the ones that people are referencing there, they quote unquote appropriated from other people before them. Like there is no original culture except for maybe like, I don't know, somewhere in Africa or something. But but then again, why does that even matter? It was a long time ago. People have changed since. No one is like that today. Who cares? I don't see the problem with it. In fact, I see a lot of problems with the problems with that, I guess.
Well, yeah, like if you don't have that blending of culture, you get stagnation for one thing, but you also get, division.
Oh, well, that was what I was going to say, that something like that doesn't serve to bring people together. It's a segregational, I guess, process, system that it divides people. I mean, we've seen in recent years where actors who portray somebody from a different culture are suddenly, they either are not allowed to, or told not to, or they step down from that position of doing an acting, voice acting or whatnot for people of different cultures. Like, well, that's kind of stupid. I don't understand why that delineation is made. Why pick just a certain few facets? Why not everything? What could you have somebody who's not a nerd play a nerd? Huh? I mean, how far do we go? It's ridiculous. Like, everything was fine. It was totally okay. Nobody cared. Like, no one was hurt, honestly. I mean, as long as you're not making fun of somebody, what? In a sense, if you're making fun of somebody, there's value in that in its own right. But
yeah, there's a difference between malicious, making fun of, and like satirical.
Well, and friends do it to each other all the time.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like that is a thing that people who care about each other do to each other, like poke at each other, kind of, mock each other a little bit, egg them on. That's something you do.
Even that, people are trying to pick it apart. And I've struggled with this a lot because I share a lot of philosophies with people like that, but that sort of thing I just cannot get on board with. That I've come to call it hipster humanism, and if I remember, I'll link to the very first minute microscopy about that, but which actually came in at exactly 1 minute on my first take. But
it's the only one that was a minute.
Pretty much. But I have this theory that I just came up with just now, like a little light bulb went off. Like, what if this is just bigotry using buzzwords to mask itself as like social justice, when it really just wants to keep that divide? Because that's all it's really doing, is dividing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and what better way, if you're a bigot, to get your way than to play into people's emotions
and to make it look like you're the good guy.
Yeah, you manipulate people into doing your will to divide people. Because if you can divide them, you can control them.
And that's working. It's working quite well, because a lot of people get that mentality. Oh, I don't want to be an asshole, and they're telling me this is an asshole thing to do, but they're like the squeaky tiny wheel, they're the very loud and annoying minority, that, like, how many, there's a handful, sure, but how many people of an actual culture do you see complaining about cultural appropriation?
Well, and actually, that is a very good point, because if you look, the people who tend to complain, in my experience, I mean, my sample size is not that big, but from what I've seen, the people who tend to be the most vocal tend to not be of the culture that they're complaining about cultural appropriation from.
Right.
Like, you get someone, us, like Scandinavian people, bitching and moaning about African cultural appropriation. It's like, well, you're not African. I get it if you were of African descent, right, then okay, well, you might have something there. But if you're not, well, your opinion is as invalid as anyone else's. So
Yeah.
just shut the fuck up. That, like, get out of here.
I get like sticking up for somebody else that might be, you know, getting kicked while they're down or something, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
And you know, like it's not like there was a big huge cry for help, like, oh, please stop this cultural appropriation that is completely ruining my life and preventing me from enjoying anything. Like, I don't think anyone has ever said that in the history of anything, you know,
No,
but
probably not. And I mean, and online, all voices are equal for the most part. Like, you have the same amount of power. Um, and yeah, I don't see that kind of thing emerging from those kinds of cultures. I mean, especially innocuous things like Halloween costumes or whatnot, adopting decorations or clothing or language from another culture. I would honestly, if somebody started getting into Scandinavian stuff, I'd be like, oh, hey, cool. That's an awesome thing. Sure, you might be Irish or black or something. Like, I don't care. That's awesome. Like, let's share ideas, share our cultures, exchange information. That's a good thing, not a
yeah,
bad thing. That brings humanity together. Okay, eventually, when the aliens come down, all this will be a thing of the past. But until then, yes, we'll have to continue discussing this.
yeah. So there's nuance to offending people.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not on board with bullying or, you know, having willful intent to harm somebody with your words or your actions. But if something I do or say or wear or whatever offends somebody, that's their right to be offended, and I'm not going to bat an eye. Like, you know, like whatever it is I'm doing, I wasn't doing it to hurt them. And, you know, if I know that it hurts them and I know that they're in the vicinity of me, I will be mindful of trying not to hurt them. But
Yeah.
I'm not, you know, it doesn't mean that I need to completely cancel whatever it was I was doing, you know?
Well, no, it'd be kind of like, let's say we used to smoke back in the day, cigarettes. And as a smoker, I was very mindful of that. Like, if I went to somebody's house and they didn't like smoking, I would smoke outside, or I would just not smoke and I'd smoke on the way home or something like that.
Right.
I wouldn't light up a cigarette in the middle of their living room. That is what, like, true offense would be.
Blow it in their face, like right up their nostrils, you know.
Oh, yeah. And even walking down the street, like, if somebody's walking behind me, I would step to the side and I'd try to minimize their exposure to it, because I don't know if they appreciate cigarette smoke.
Right.
I mean, it's just common sense courtesy, right? Like, and if you're observing those kinds of things with culture, I don't see how you could be doing any harm. Or culture or whatever, like personality or something like that. I don't. I think that the distinction between all of these things, as if like somehow culture is different than anything else, like I said, the whole nerd thing. Where's the nerd representation in the world? Like, I think it's every bit as valid. And I got bullied and fucked with and all that stuff for being somebody that has glasses and likes computers and everything. Like, so is that invalid because I have pale skin or something, or I'm not
the
part
answer
of
is yes, apparently.
a culture? Yeah, that's bullshit. It doesn't matter where you come from. It should be the same thing. If you're a dick, that's wrong. Don't be a dick, basically.
Yeah. Well, they created the perfect trap and this is what bullies do, by the way.
Mm.
They basically said, if you're not white, you're at a disadvantage, and therefore, and this is horribly flawed logic, if you are white, you automatically have the advantage. And so if you say, well, if that's offending them, like, I'm offended by this, shouldn't that matter? And they say, well, no, you're white and you're an asshole for bringing that up. So you get trapped in this loop. Like, you can't win. And just saying that makes me sound like an asshole because of that trap, because of that dichotomy they built.
Yeah, very
That's
clever.
a bully mentality.
Well, and what is the purpose served by that?
Sphincter says what? That's what it is.
You are correct in what you're saying. I think it is exactly like that. I mean, the problem I have is things are so condensed, I guess, distilled down to very simple things when human beings are nuanced. Like, there's a lot going on there, and you can't take one or two features and lump them in with everybody else. That divides people unnecessarily, and it creates a lot more problems than it solves.
Yeah, it's really like, I understand a lot of these people come from a place of good intention, as often bad things do. But
Yes.
if you feel that you need to speak up for someone who's not even there, maybe don't. But if there is somebody in the room that you feel you need to speak up for, why don't you, instead of like taking it upon yourself to be their voice, why don't you go to them and ask them if they're okay with that? Because you're putting them in an embarrassing situation, right? Like, if you call attention to the fact that like you might not even know this person, and they point at you from across the room and say, you're offending that person over there by culturally appropriating them.
And honestly, that's kind of offensive too.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Like, there's so much about it that just rubs me the wrong way, because I was bullied. I think that's why I have such a problem with it, because I recognize so many traits of bullying in this cancel culture shit,
Oh yeah, it definitely is. And it's one thing if you recognize something, right? Like, there's certain things that are pretty cut and dried. Somebody's in a back alley being stabbed by somebody else. There is a knife penetrating their body and blood is squirting out. Like,
yeah,
okay, that's pretty clear. But things that involve emotion and perception and subjective analysis, I don't think an outside person can judge that. And yeah, that's the whole thing. Like, ask the person, how do you feel about this? And in fact, that could almost be, if somebody came up to me and asked me like, oh, well, they're talking about nerds, how do you feel about that? I'm like, what? Are you calling me a nerd now?
Right.
Like, oh my God, like, I would be offended by it too. Maybe, like you said, just leave it alone. It's okay. Or observe things. You can kind of tell by body language and things if somebody's if they feel uncomfortable about something. And maybe that's the time to step in and like, hey, maybe we should cut this out. We don't need to make these kinds of jokes or something. That's fair. But to breathe down everybody's neck over things and get all emotional. I mean, shit, if you get emotional, you're already on the losing side of logic. That's not how it works. But then, of course, logic is the problem now too. Well, and that kind of goes with what you're saying about how things are manipulated. That, all you have to do is label something as something, and then everybody kind of like gets skeeved out, and they're like, "Ooh, maybe I should stay away from that."
Yeah. Well, it's like you probably ran into this too, but like, as a kid, if somebody gets something wrong and you correct them, you're a nerd.
Yeah.
Because you're smart. They take something that's a good thing and they turn it into a negative and make you feel like shit about it. And
Yeah.
that's like, that's sort of the same thing going on here. Like, oh, you like that culture? Well, it's not your culture, so you're a dick. Well, you just took something that I was enjoying that wasn't hurting anyone physically or mentally or anything. Like, it wasn't directed at anyone. It was just me like enjoying wearing dreadlocks or whatever, like
Yeah.
listening to I'm on a Mexican radio. Like,
Well, I don't know if that's exactly culture there. It's 80s for sure. But no, I get what you're saying. Like, oh man. I had a point. I should probably have some more beer. Because this is actually like a very deep, good topic. Well, what if you moved to a place though?
Right. Yeah.
Like when in Rome sort of thing. Like if I moved to Jamaica, which I've often contemplated doing, or like, what if I adopted the mannerisms, the clothing, I like the same kind of food and do the same kind of things just because I look different or came from a different place? Is that wrong? And
yeah.
At that point, then, if it's okay, if it's geographically limited, right? Why is it not okay if it's geographically separated? I don't understand what the problem is with appreciating and immersing yourself in different cultures.
Or accents even. Like,
yeah.
I've always thought if I moved to another country, I would do my I would try my hardest to adopt the accent, because that is so much part of the language. Because if you think about it, when you have trouble understanding people's English, it's often because they're still speaking in their native accent.
Yeah.
And it makes things sound almost unintelligible in some cases.
Well, that's true.
That's not like a cultural appropriation sort of thing. It's just like communication.
Good. It's a linguistic thing that
it's
has to do with the way your native tongue operates compared with someone else's.
It's a harmless, non-emotional affectation of your communication. Like it.
Yeah.
But people will like hear you talk in another accent or something and get on you about that. Like,
does anybody? I would ask. Does anybody have a problem with people speaking in a British accent? If they look like us?
Well, yeah. See, some people get up in arms about that. Like, the word British accent pisses people off too. Well, is it Cockney or is it?
I will. Yeah, I'll give it that British. There are all kinds of accents, and if you look into the different accents in different regions, it's actually quite distinct. But that does illustrate a point of oversimplification. Like, people who don't know will look at things and be like, "Oh, that's British." Like, well, actually, that's Scottish.
Actually, that's British. Can't pronounce those T's.
Yeah. Yeah, that oh man, there's so much to discuss here. Holy shit.
But to go back to what I was saying at the head of the show, like, why is it okay? And I'm not saying I'm not okay with this, because I am, but why is it okay to accept someone for adopting a new gender? But culture is somehow a bad thing,
Well, I totally agree. And
on the flip of that, people
no, I agree with your premise. Let's say.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I understood. Like, on the flip of that, people who like are opposed to recognizing someone's chosen gender or whatever, they're seen as the asshole, right? So it's a like a mirror sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people that are like, oh, screw what you like, like this is what I think you should be, are all of a sudden the bad guys, whereas on the other side, the cultural appropriation side, the people who are like, no, you should be who you were born to be, they're the good guys. Like, what?
Yeah, that actually sounds like a lot of bullshit right there.
Yeah.
um like, what if somebody, I don't know, moved from uh let's say Egypt to Japan? Do they have to still keep speaking their native language, behave the way they did, or is it okay for them to adopt the Japanese ways and learn Japanese and just integrate into that society, or vice versa? I mean, I want to kind of eliminate the US because I feel like there's some issues with hyper focusing on that kind of muddy the waters there, because like you said, we're kind of a melting pot there. I mean, what is the United States culture? It's every culture. It's like Babylon 5 or Deep Space Nine. Like, what is the culture of those places? It's nothing. Yeah, okay, Deep Space Nine was held by Starfleet, but it was definitely not a Starfleet base. Um, and as somebody who sees the world as a planet, I have a problem with people taking issue with individuals coming from one place where they have their own sort of culture, bringing it to another, integrating and sort of merging those ideas together, influencing other people. Like, or like, why is that bad? I don't understand that.
Well, speaking of Japan,
mm-hmm.
here's an instance where if you don't practice cultural appropriation, you'll be seen as an asshole, right? Everything pisses the Japanese off. Like, if you go have dinner with people at a restaurant in Japan and your drinks come and you just take a sip like you would here, you've offended everyone. You got to wait until everyone has their drinks and then the host like initiates it and stuff. Like, there's so much etiquette in Japan. And if you don't adopt that, if you don't even know it, like, they don't care. They think you're an asshole. Like, like, so it really,
because
it
it's a
depends on the culture.
homogenous society, so the expectation is everybody should just know this,
right?
And so if you come in big as you please, like cowboys, guns blazing, like, and just down the drink, like, they're like, who is this asshole? And so
and other cultures have that too. I think in Sweden, like, punctuality is a big deal. And stuff like that, things that we generally just kind of are lackadaisical about.
And if you live in Maui, punctuality, yeah, well, let's say both are irrelevant.
Do they have punctuation in?
Well, I mean, English,
I've never actually noticed.
Thing, but native languages, maybe not. I mean, it's been shown that you can get away without punctuation. In fact, you can get away without vowels. Writing entire sentences without vowels, like, people can comprehend that, which is crazy
for the most part. But it is, it's pretty easy to get confused.
You're gonna get confused pretty quick.
Like, let's eat, grandpa, or let's eat grandpa. There's situations that crop up where punctuation's awesome. So.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, it is important. And English is kind of a weird language in that regard. And that's one of the things, like, English isn't really the original language. It comes from all over the place. Like, England and Germany and France and Greece and all over the place. Everything influenced that language.
Esperanto.
And didn't that come about in the 1800s, I think, as an artificial language, which
It's like
is actually
a mix of English and Spanish and French and like
yeah,
a couple others, a German maybe.
I think it's kind of cool. Like it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Now it is kind of a bit of a joke, but it's a clever idea.
Yeah. Well, the premise is like you were saying, like you don't necessarily need punctuation to be understood. And that whole premise was like there's enough words that have common root that theoretically any one of those native tongues could understand Esperanto.
Yeah, and
without learning it.
And I think that's an interesting concept.
That's kind of a melting pot language, if you will.
Yeah, creating a world language, something everybody can use. Well, and it wouldn't be everybody. I mean, it would be mostly the peoples who speak similar tongues who could kind of get into that. But it's a good cause. I mean, eventually.
That was always the interesting thing about Star Trek is each planet had a language.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. That I mean, how many languages are there on Earth? And we're
hundreds.
Yeah, insignificant ball of dust floating in this tiny corner of the galaxy. Like, so this huge empire of like the Klingons, are you telling me they only have one dialect?
Yeah.
Between
what do you
all
speak?
Of them?
Oh, I speak Earth.
Yeah. That,
really? Okay.
Well, actually, that would be something to aspire to.
We should just invent a kitchen sink language.
Yeah. Well,
call it Earth.
Actually, that made me think of something rather interesting. Speaking of culture, if you were an alien, right, like spacefaring people, and you flew to Earth from somewhere else, another star somewhere. Well, you wouldn't fly from another star, another planet around another star, and a distant place, let's say, and you looked at Earth. What is the culture of Earth? Because, you know, in going back to Star Trek, you think we're told like, oh, there's the Klingons, there's the Vulcans, the whatever, the Andorians, they all have like a homogenous culture across the whole planet. And I suppose that could emerge with countless centuries of evolution and interaction. But I don't think that would actually be the case.
Well, they spoke to that in Star Trek. They often talked about what it means to be human or humanity. And I think that those are the things that we typically see as like, you know, for us, it might be like, you know, birthrights, you know, like, you know, we should all be free, or, you know, like things that we all generally agree on or whatever on a whole other planet might not be, you know, the common way of thinking, you know. So like, I guess in that sense, there are some general cultural things that we all share, I guess.
Well, I agree. But my point was, before somebody, you, the viewers out there, start screaming about cultural appropriation, I would say distill it down to what the culture of Earth is first. And then branch out from that to understand the varied deviations of Earth culture. But if you can't define what Earth culture is, then you've got a lot of homework. And that's kind of my point.
Yeah. Again, like education fails again, because like sociology isn't something that you really ever see in K through 12. No. But having that understanding of your own culture, of other cultures, of personal interactions, like relationship dynamics, things like that. That's a huge gap in understanding that so many people like go their whole lives without ever studying.
Oh,
Yeah.
I agree. And I would conjecture that a lot of people who take issue with cultural appropriation don't even know the culture they're talking so firmly about the appropriation of.
Yeah.
Like, that is a huge problem. I, you know, and in fact, it almost feels very insensitive, or I don't want to say racist, but bigoted, right?
Yeah.
Everything is kind of like condensed into this superficial kind of idea about what things are. Oh, the fighting Irish, right? You wear green, you punch people, and you drink a lot. That is not what Irish people are. Like that. If you think that, oh man, wow, you've got nothing to stand on at that point, in my view.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole thing. Like, understanding things and realizing that, and maybe the reason why people get so incensed is because of ignorance, because they don't realize how much alike people are. The differences that are outlined are so insignificant and superficial as to almost be irrelevant.
Do
And
you think religion is inextricably tied to culture?
I think it can be. I mean, it depends where you go in the world. Many years ago, what I said, the United States would have a particular religious kind of slant, but not today. There are certainly places where large proportions of the population, and this is the whole thing, it's not everyone, it's a proportion of the population.
Yeah.
So it's a sliding scale. You go to places in the Middle East, and people tend to be a lot more Muslim, but not everybody is. There's probably atheists in the Middle East.
But it does dictate the culture to some degree.
Well, that's true, and well, religion being something that has been a part of a people's existence for a very long time does kind of influence behavior and development, and and yeah, I think it's kind of partially the genesis of the current culture, I guess.
Yeah. Just an
But
interesting thought I had, like, because, I don't know that religion itself is necessarily a culture, but it has so much sway over culture.
well, in the well, I would
Because
ask.
religion spreads over the whole world, so it's not, it's, I don't consider it culture. uh it's more like guidelines of how to conduct your life or whatever. It's not so much about, like, I don't know, just like social mores, and like, it's really hard to actually kind of delineate the two when you
Well,
think about it,
that was
but
what I was going to say. Like, yes, certainly it influences things.
I feel like there's reason enough to call them separate things, but they're also pretty closely related. So
Well, and I think your idea of dismissing things comes from your own particular sort of stance, like the way you see things, which is very similar to the way I see things. Um, but not everybody sees it that way. Um, Religion can be a part of culture. I mean, it's intertwined with behaviors and centuries of development. Uh, like, I don't think the two are necessarily separable in all cases. Um, Maybe they should be, but they're probably not.
it gets me thinking, like, I know we've kind of toyed with the idea of doing an episode about whether animals have religion, but do
Yeah.
animals have culture? Do they?
Yeah. Yes, I think so.
So, so could it be said that, would it be such a wild idea to think that they have religion?
No, not at all. And I mean, it kind of goes back to the question I posed before, which is what is culture?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it behavioral? Is it environmental? Is it a combination of the two, or are there more factors involved? Like, what makes a culture distinct?
I don't think you recognize what culture is until you see something to compare it against, to contrast it
Yes.
against, I should say.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. That things have to be different enough for you to be like, oh, wow, that's a different way of doing things, or well, they're doing things weird,
Yeah.
what's that all about? But if it's something very subtle or very simple, it doesn't get attention, and that wouldn't be defined as a culture. I think it's, well, it requires a certain proportion of things, and I don't know what that proportion is, but it requires a certain proportion of things to be different enough that you can say, oh, that person is distinctly different from me in behavior or dress, or their patterns of like what they do, their jobs, the food they eat, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it's got to be a little bit of everything. uh, all of those things have to be different. If it's just like, oh yeah, this group of people happens to eat cheese quesadillas every day, well, I don't think that's different enough to constitute a culture.
I I guess you could just really kind of narrow it down to something that people do in a collective sense. And that could be between two people or 2 million. Like uh the way you wear your pants can be seen as a cultural appropriation. Like if you sag your pants, you could be said to be trying to appropriate like the gangsta rap culture of the 90s, where that was like all the rage to like show as much of your ass as possible.
Yeah. Which is distinctly American.
Mhm.
However, if somebody on the outside, if you ask them, interviewed them, like, what is a distinctly American trait, very few would say, oh, sagging, that's an American trait. So it's like, that's my point, is things are far more complex, especially in a place as big as the US.
It's interesting to see what other cultures think is representative of your own culture.
Oh yeah, well, I know from my experience that a lot of Japanese people see the US as a bunch of cowboys. That is how they perceive it. Like, we
I don't
wear.
remember who was telling me, but there's like gift shops in Germany that'll have like, the America section, and it's just Confederate flags and stuff, and like Second Amendment shit, and like they think we're just a bunch of gun-toting racists. Like,
Well, and that's the whole point. That actually, this really goes back to the heart of the matter. Like, what is culture, and what is appropriation of that culture, and how does it cause harm?
mhm.
If you, I don't think it's possible to define a culture as distinctly as people do. I mean, maybe very small places you could certainly do that. Um, you could get places like New Zealand and say, well, there's a New Zealand culture, but then again, there's like millions of people there, so I don't know that you really could even do that. And then
I think
what do you choose? Here's the problem with defining culture is, what do you choose to include in the list of cultural traits, and what do you exclude, and why? Like, it's not something that there is no New Zealand cultural website that explains exactly what makes New Zealand a culture, if it even is one. And as such, there's nothing with the US that does that, or anyone else.
Well, I mean, we would probably say, oh, there's not really any definable cultural difference between us and people that were born and raised in Spokane, Washington. But, you know, it's on the other side of the state. There's a whole lot of differences in, you know, the terrain and the political climate and just
lifestyle.
Yeah.
No,
So,
Eastern
like-
and Western Washington are very, very different.
yeah.
So I mean, like,
you
you
couldn't-
matter.
You couldn't tell us apart like in a lineup or whatever, like, oh, Tacoma, Spokane or whatever. But if you got to know us well enough, you'd probably see differences that you could define as a culture.
But those differences wouldn't be like an outfit that you're wearing.
Not necessarily, no.
And
I think that the stark contrasts come from big geographical divides, the island effect. You know, whether it's a giant impassable mountain range or a huge body of water or whatever, I think that's where, just like standard biological evolution, that's where you see a lot of cultural evolution too.
Yeah,
where things kind of diverge along different branches of the same tree and eventually start looking different enough to call different. You know?
Yeah. Or behaving different, because I mean, culture is a behavioral thing, not a physical trait sort of thing.
Right.
And I think that is a factor that confuses people, because, you know, if you go to Ukraine, they're going to swear up and down that they're not Russian, and people are going to say, like, that's a huge point of contention. There's distinctly Ukrainian people and Russian people. And even within the boundaries of Russia, there's a bunch of different peoples. There's Mongolians and all kinds of crazy shit there. Yeah. You go to Scandinavian.
Russian and Ukrainians can understand each other, but it's a decidedly different language.
Totally. You go to the Scandinavian countries where we hail from. Iceland, you know,
Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, to some degree, they can all understand each other.
Yeah, well,
enough.
Isn't Finland actually kind of partially Russian now?
Well, that's the other thing. When are you talking about? You know, like,
well, I would say like now, and if it isn't now, if it's something that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I have a Scandinavian map here from the 60s or 70s. I could tell you, because it says USSR here. Finland was on its own back then, so
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, and if the point I was getting at is, like, if it's something that doesn't exist anymore, like, you know, the whole Native American feather thing, like, who does that nowadays? If you do that, well, is it really appropriation of culture? And like you said, I also take issue with that term, as if you're stealing something, like by somebody who is not of that culture adopting some facet of that culture into their persona, that somehow they're doing harm, like diluting that culture in some way.
And for one night of the year, you know, like Halloween, like, you know, okay, so Halloween started as something completely different than it is now, which is a whole other cultural evolution sort of thing. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, like, you don't necessarily dress up as these things to, like, make fun of those things. You're just dressing up to be somebody who you're not for a night.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
It's role playing. Yeah.
It's really no different. Like, if you were like, oh, I'm gonna go to the Western con and dress as Tonto, like,
Hmm.
is that cultural appropriation, or are you, like, what do they call it? Uh, cosplay or what?
Cosplay, yeah.
Yeah, cosplaying as Tonto.
Yeah. Well, and I go back to the whole nerd thing. What about people that put on the thick frame glasses and the buck teeth and you're like, I'm a computer programmer? Like, well, that's a culture too, by the way.
yeah,
Um, Not necessarily that absurd, but it's still a culture. The hacker programmer community, and I will say that community is far more accepting of different people than probably any other community I have ever experienced.
yeah.
By the way,
It's the caricature nature. I can see how people might feel like attacked or offended or called out or something by uh, blowing out of proportion certain features that are associated with a culture. Like you're saying, the buck teeth and the tape on the glasses or whatever. Like all the
yeah,
usual 80s tropes of nerds and stuff. And it's like, if you share one of those characteristics just as a person, and you see that as being like something that's laughed at or whatever, okay, yeah, you might be like, oh, that kind of sucks, but like, how fucking bad off are you really from it? Like, has it harmed you? Has it like destroyed your world? Because if it has, you've got a lot more problems on your plate.
that this is very true. Yes.
like this is the least of your problems. Like, you are unstable.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and I have a problem with the idea that we should never delve into those places, because maybe somebody might be offended, right?
Right.
Somebody might not appreciate, uh, or not get the joke or something like that,
Mhm.
if there is one at all. And in fact, the assumption that there's always a joke is kind of a problem too, because I don't think there is one. I mean, as a kid, I was a member of the Y Indian Guides. So it was the YMCA. They had this side thing. It was like kind of Native American inspired ish things. And we had bonfires and cookouts and went to camps and stuff like that and dressed up, role played,
You
basically.
racist bastard.
Well, but it was, the cool thing is it was kind of uh tied into like uh survival techniques, simplified technology, learning how to do things like work with your hands, learn how to track, um and that was super valuable. There was so much more there. um yeah, somebody on the outside would look and be like, oh, hey, they've got these vests and they've got the feathers, and yeah, they're making fun of the Native Americans. Like, no, actually, it was kind of appreciative
Yeah.
of those people. Like, I learned a lot of survival skills from participating in that group.
I in 2014, I went to Knott's Berry Farm, and there was like you could like go into a sweat lodge or something. Like, they had a whole interactive kind of immersive experience for Native American culture, like from that area, indigenous to that area. Like, I think that's cool.
Oh yeah.
Um, but like, as far as jokes go, like, I really, I it makes me sad when people see jokes as, they call it racist or whatever, or like, it's just another way to laugh at things or be ironic about things. Like the movie Blazing Saddles wasn't meant to like keep the black man down. It was meant to poke fun at the people who want that, like.
No, and in fact, things like Blazing Saddles, a parody of racism went a long way to like addressing and actually overcoming racism.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. Like
Well,
there's nothing wrong with that.
For instance, like there was a Thanksgiving. I went to a girlfriend and I went to dinner with my parents at the Keg or something. And we sat down and, you know, got drinks and appetizers or whatever. And then another large table, a big family got sat next to us, and they were all Native American. And, you know, we had ordered our food around the same time they did. And when they were taking our order, they said, we're out of turkey. And we're like, how do you run out of turkey on Thanksgiving? Like, if you're open, like, wouldn't you have a bunch of turkey? But whatever. And the Native American table got like all the turkey, and then dessert comes around, and like they were out of pumpkin pie, and the Native American family got all the pumpkin pie too. And my mom like screamed at that point because she loves pumpkin pie. But like we laughed about it later. Like, oh, the irony is like, you know, like, oh, we came and took their land and created this holiday based around that, and then they get to, you know, partake of all those things and take away our turkey and pumpkin pie.
Well,
you know, we laughed about it.
Not only that, but being a sovereign nation or a series of sovereign nations, they open casinos and take all the white man's money.
Oh yeah.
Like freely, and we do it like willingly.
Yeah.
Have you seen casinos? I mean, you've seen the one down there on Portland Ave, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. The brand new one, it's pretty extravagant. Yeah.
Oh my God. And that is a it's probably like $1 billion worth of construction. Like they didn't get that through government grants. That was because of slot machines.
Well, and they have so much money that like just being like a certain percentage of that tribe allows you to get a monthly paycheck from birth. You know, like they were treated horribly, don't get me wrong, but they're not bad off today whatsoever.
No, well, okay, so the
and it's not like they have to live on a reservation. They can go live anywhere they want
anywhere. Yeah,
so they have freedom.
The ancestors might have been treated horribly, but today,
yeah,
it's not the same thing.
Like, it's great. They have freedom and sovereignty. That's something that we can't say.
I wish I had. Can I join up? Oh my God, dude. Oh, how do I sign up?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
Like, yeah. Your ancestors paid some big bills, and honestly, I mean, maybe instead of reparations, maybe we should have, you know, like sovereignty for African Americans. Maybe that would be fair enough, right? Like let them have a little bit more leeway on the rules or something, you know, like let them have casinos, you know, like there you go. It works for the Native Americans.
Release the rules and stuff like that. I mean, especially because it's been so long.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get into the reparations thing yet, because I think that's kind of its own topic. And we should probably have like Oceans on here.
Yeah.
To talk about this. But oh man. Yeah. I had a really good point, but I opened another beer and now I'm
So I mean, that just it got me thinking, like there's a hypocrisy in being okay with a gender change but not a culture change, because they're both intangible things, right? Sex is one thing, gender is intangible. You know, your sex is whatever meat you got between your legs, or
biological stuff
that
you can't change, physical things.
Yeah. And you know, your sex is your sex. You're born with it, you're stuck with it. But gender is as fluid as you want it to be. And culture is the same way, in my opinion. I don't see any reason you should be stuck with what culture you're born into.
No, that would annoy me because I'm not really like super keen on the Scandinavian stuff. Like when I was a kid, I loved Japanese stuff.
Lutefisk, ugh.
No,
their food is the worst, honestly. Like,
yeah, well, lefse is pretty good.
Their bread is like stale and like chip your tooth kind of hard bread.
Yeah, and that's what
we have to live with.
I would much rather. I like the Mexican food. Definitely a fan of Mexican food. Street tacos and all that shit.
Italian food.
Thai food. And that's the whole thing. Like, we are people of planet Earth. The culture is Earth. Yes, there are variations, there are differences, but who cares? Why focus on those differences? They don't matter. Let's all get into bed together and share a meal. Wait, did that sound a little
that sounds a little poly, bro.
Well, I am poly, so
you and your like harem of 33 girlfriends or whatever, like eating Indian food in bed, like farting all night.
Naan bread. Yeah,
naan bread, is that like gluten free?
No,
naan.
That's NAAN bread.
I know. Garlic naan is awesome. At pesto naan. Have you had pesto?
Oh yes. Yeah. Curry.
Saffron Grill up in Northgate. It's the best.
There's the place,
and they have Rochefort beer.
Nice.
Yep.
The place in Kent. Oh God, too much beer. I can't remember the name of it now.
See, we should be getting paid for these name drops.
Ishtar.
Oh, yeah.
In Kent. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. Like, yes, it is a little skeevy and sketchy, and there's some crazy shit happening there, but it's worth going in there. Best food. Oh my God, it's so good. Like, and so I think, well, if I eat that, am I culturally appropriating?
Yep.
The fuck? I don't understand that.
Right.
Like, why do I have to eat lutefisk? Because I'm Scandinavian. What should I? Am I relegated to just eating lutefisk every day? And the occasional lefse.
Scandinavians are big into Indian food and pizza too. In fact, they have curry pizza. They pour curry sauce over it and they just yum it up.
And I'll bet there are Indian people, like actual Indian people, who like
corn dogs.
Food. Yeah, like
poutine.
Who cares?
Actually, they do. Like, there's a lot of Punjabi population in British Columbia, at least. I don't know about Canada on the whole, but
interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's easier to immigrate there than here. So,
oh man,
at least that's what they told me. Because I spent a day at the immigration office. I was up visiting a friend, and her mom worked at the immigration office there. Very small town. And that was the most awesome day. Like, I got to experience so many different cultures. There was like a lot of them unfortunately were fleeing America because of Trump. But so a lot of them were asking me questions like, like as a native American, like someone from the United States, they were asking like, what do you think of Trump? And I was like, most of us don't really like him. Like, we just have a weird electoral college where like the minority get to pick who, like, But there was like people from Mexico, people from India, like Pakistan, like all kinds of different places. And then some people invited, it was like a holiday, a Sikh holiday. So some people invited me to their Sikh temple. And
Oh, the fucking Sikhs.
yeah, that was
Oh
amazing.
man, those are some amazing people.
Yeah, like they were
Oh,
the kindest people. And I was culturally stepping on all kinds of shit, and they were not offended at all. They were like, oh hey, just so you know, like it's in our culture to accept food with both hands. And I was like, oh okay. And then I just accepted food with both hands. They weren't like, you're a fucking dick, man. I'm like,
yeah.
like that's how we are doing things now. Like this whole cultural appropriation is basically just
What?
bullying.
Yeah, and it's flipping from like 1 to 11 all of a sudden,
Mhm.
when it probably doesn't constitute that. It's kind
No.
of like making assumptions. And my rule, one of my core rules, is always assume best intentions. Um,
Yeah,
oh
but
man,
when people come at you with like you know a certain tone in their voice, you can hear the aggression.
yeah.
It's hard to assume good intentions at that point. So, and I
Well,
think
no,
that's where the
I'm
bullying
speaking
comes in.
more. I'm speaking more to the other people
Oh
that
yeah,
like when you go to judge somebody, start with the premise of assuming best intentions of the
yeah,
person you're judging.
yes,
And can I just point out here?
yes.
Uh, yes, yes. Can I just point out here that the term America is a problem? That when I think of America, I think of Canada, the US, Mexico, and all the countries in South America. Like that is America.
uh,
It is a huge freaking place.
I was just having this conversation actually, and the reason I'm okay with saying I'm American is because the name of our country is United States of America.
That's true.
We're the only country that has America in the country name. And saying I'm a like I literally saw someone on Facebook say I'm a United States of America. And I was like, who the fuck says that? Like, like it's a mouthful. Like that's
that is
weird.
that's
Like,
okay.
like we say Australian, right? But the name of their country technically is the it starts with a C. I don't know. It's not Confederate, but like it's the something of Australia. Um,
Okay.
and it's escaping me right now. But we don't say like I'm the consolatory of Australia or whatever it is. It started with a C. I forget. I could look it up.
Cunnilingus.
Cunnilingus, yes. But that's the
Wouldn't that
point.
be a hell of a country?
That's the point. It's basically just abbreviating like the country you're from. And
Yeah,
we're the
yeah.
only country that has America in it. So
I don't have a problem with that, but
yeah,
what I have a problem with is that it isn't understood that America is a
Commonwealth. That
big place. Oh, Commonwealth.
Commonwealth.
Okay.
Yes, Commonwealth of Australia.
Sent down to long-term memory retrieval. Yeah. Well, that's the whole point. It's like, yes, there is a little canal in Panama. Um, but basically, this entire place is one huge landmass. Um, and I don't know that you can like say. I mean, can you say that Canadians are one culture? I no. Of the Canadians I know, they're
Oh
all
no.
very different. The same thing with the US. What is the United States culture? What is it?
I mean, take the province of Quebec, Quebec. Like just the fact that there's people from that province that pronounce it 3 different ways, that's a culture difference within that province itself.
Oh, and don't they mostly speak French there?
It's about 50-50, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's more than we have in the US.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, a thing like if things change, let's say like a bunch of Russians immigrated to the US, and all of a sudden Russian was like the second most spoken language in the US, and everybody had to learn Russian instead of Spanish. Is the US suddenly Russian? Are we a Russian culture? Or we are Americo-Russo culture, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how I would
prefer that. I would prefer that as a person that likes, a broad range of experience. Having 2 vastly different language types be like the dominant, like, because we're a Germanic language, but Spanish is like a Latin language, and a lot of languages are Latin in origin. And so that is very familiar to us already. And it's not that dissimilar to Germanic, but Cyrillic is like its own thing, like without getting into like completely different phonetics, like instead of an alphabet, you have characters with, like Japanese and Chinese and stuff like that. Cyrillic's about as different as you can get with having an alphabet.
Yeah, I took Russian for like 3 years. Of course, I've forgotten most of what I've learned, but it is very different and hard to wrap your head around. Niet.
Спасибо.
Oh man. Okay, no, we're not going to get into Russian. Oh man.
That would be cool. Like, I mean, honestly, we could do with more cultural appropriation in this country. Like,
I agree that is. Here's the thing. My philosophy is the way to avoid war is sex and trade. So you meet people, you like them, you have sex, and you trade things if you don't have sex, or maybe you do trade things if you do.
Maybe
trade sex. And in doing that, you exchange cultures. You learn things about each other. You have your own goods. There was a time when fine china was like the finest of stuff you could ever get. It was stuff from China was seen as like the height of financially negotiable product, I guess.
Yeah, and they're just plates.
Yeah.
They're just fucking plates.
Well, they're a little more than that, but today Chinese stuff is seen as kind of not so good. And I don't know where I was going with that, but
well, no, there's a perception to it.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, I mean, that's a huge element of it too, is perception. Like, perception of culture. Like, is there, I don't know, is there almost like a dominance sort of thing? Like, do you think that these people who are calling out others for cultural appropriation are seeing their own culture as dominant, like the other cultures are beneath them?
Ooh. Oh man.
Like, on a subconscious level, do you think that might be happening?
Ooh, that is an interesting angle. Oh shit.
It's because I opened a beer. Well, fourth beer.
It's okay. I've got my fourth one here. So hey, skull.
Yeah, skull. Yeah. It's fucking Scandinavians.
So if you say that and you're not Scandinavian, you're culturally appropriating. And we're gonna fucking stick you with I don't know, some kind of knife or
Mjolnir.
Yeah,
Smash you over the head with Mjolnir.
Exactly. I'm gonna ram my boat right into your boat.
By the way, if you haven't been to the Scandinavian Museum in Ballard, you should check that out. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
And apparently there's like a mead bar up there now.
What?
Yeah. Oh, we have one here in Tacoma though. Cult
Okay.
Meadery. Yeah.
Oh, I've got to check that out.
Yep.
So is mead culturally significant to Scandinavians?
Oh yeah.
Well,
it's not just Scandinavian though. Like I believe mead was also in, you know, the Great Britain area.
Wasn't it in Egypt as well? I mean, it's honey
Possibly.
wine.
I mean, yeah, honey. Like you realize you can ferment anything, and you're just gonna do it. So, like,
yeah,
so
it's got
stands
sugar
for reason.
in it. You can ferment it, and you're gonna make alcohol.
Stands to reason it's gonna crop up in a few different places. So.
Okay, and okay, you know, downing a little bit more beer. Doesn't alcohol kind of interconnect all cultures? Like, doesn't every culture have alcohol in it?
Every culture is seen as a drunk. Like, seriously. Like the Italians have their wine, the French have their wine, the Irish have their beer, the Germans have their beer, the English have their beer, and then you've got like the Russians with their vodka and Mexicans with their tequila, like, and then you've got your scotches and stuff. Like, yeah, there's pretty much every culture has a fucking alcohol related to it.
So
sake in Japan.
In Japan, yeah.
Yep.
So the question is then, if you drink alcohol from another culture, are you appropriating that culture? Or are you just a fucking drunk?
Nah,
like everybody else.
You're just a drunk like everyone. Well, you appreciate Russian stuff. Have you had vodka with pickles?
I have not. I've actually seen that.
I fucking hate pickles, but with vodka, they're actually pretty good. And that's a Russian thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like the tequila with a lime. Like you take a shot of vodka and then you bite into a pickle. It's pretty good. It's not just pickles. The Russians will bite into anything, but they have a lot of pickles.
Even a fucking tank. T90? Yeah. Oh man. If I could
I used to
reach
work
back
with,
there and grab my AK, I've done the same thing.
Your Mosina Gaunt.
Well, I've got the Mosina Gaunt and AK too.
Yeah, I used to work with a Russian guy that got me into that. He grew his own pickles and stuff, like made his own pickles, I should say. Grow pickles, but yeah.
Grow zucchini. Them.
Yeah. Ow. Bumping into shit.
Did you throw your drunk. Back out like grabbing a CD there? Oh man.
I am rapidly approaching 40.
Well, I'm much older than that, old man. Oh man, we're gonna get all like Cisco and Dax here pretty soon. That's probably a good point to end on. I think we've put out some really good talking points, though.
Yeah,
I don't think this conversation it's far from finished, but
right. Yeah, I mean, I would invite somebody to come on and counter argue this, because I feel like there was just a lot of good points that I've never heard be made before, like tying it to bullying behavior and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like the logic is pretty sound there. Like I can reconcile those feelings having been bullied with what it's like to be on the receiving end of, this hipster humanism, where like people are like the holier than thou virtue signaling, whatever you want to call it, moral grandstanding, where they basically try to paint themselves as better than you and shame you for acting the way you do or liking the things that you like.
Well, and paint themselves better than you and shame you for your own sake to defend you. Like,
yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Right. Yeah. Like, yeah, it would be great to have like some social justice warrior on, and then like somebody, from one of these, so-called like
oppressed cultures.
Yeah. To say like, like, well, what do you feel? Like, what do people in your culture tend to vocalize about? Like, are they bothered by this? Are they like whatever?
I would say that is the most important question to ask, and it's a question that's not asked by the self-appointed defenders of culture. I don't think they ever contemplate such things.
No, I don't think they're ever.
It would be a completely different dynamic.
Yeah, it's that whole situation of like, hey, I didn't really ask for your help. Like it's like you're thrusting yourself upon these cultures that maybe really weren't like asking you to butt in the first place. Like,
yeah,
like I feel like a lot of people can probably see like the nuance and the fact that like wearing a Halloween costume is far from like oppressive behavior or like segregating diners and water fountains and shit like that. Like, those are stark contrasts. Like, if you can't see that, there's a problem with your thinking.
And that is a far cry from like imprisoning people and forcing them to work as slave laborers.
Yeah. Like, seriously, like
if you just wear an outfit, a cosplay, then it's not equivalent, like, by any stretch of the imagination. But if you feel different, definitely shoot your comments down there below, because I'd be curious to hear what people have to say about this.
Yeah, dropping comments all over the comment section.
Is that Nick Manning?
Yep.
Oh man. Are we gonna get demonetized?
No, that's pretty obscure. That one will skate by. We're learning the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah, slowly but surely. And eventually we will become gods.
We should just have a whole episode where we try to get demonetized, like just right on the edge, right?
If only there was like a YouTube like scale, like a demonetization scale where it's like, oh, it's going to the yellow. Oh, you're demonetized.
Okay, we got to do that one of these episodes. We got to have a little dialed.
Oh man. This is a good episode. There's so much to talk about here. And I feel like we didn't really discuss everything, but I feel like we did discuss everything. I know that's a little bit
intuitive. We touched on a lot of stuff. Like, there's a whole lot of other roads you can go down with this. Like, like cancel culture, we've made references to it, but we didn't really talk about it, like that would be a whole other offshoot,
Oh yeah.
like the whole Dr. Seuss thing that just happened, and Pepe Le Pew and all that stuff. And it's like, that's a division in itself, because those companies did that to themselves. It wasn't like people pressured them into it, but people are treating them like they succumbed to some pressure or something. And it's like, well, they made their own choice. I don't know. Like it's really hard to say, like, when something is too far.
Well, and it's hard when you judge retroactively the past based on the mores of the present.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it too.
That's a huge thing.
I mean, like they could have easily made Pepe Le Pew different. Like act differently, like learn from his mistakes. In fact, that would have been like a great teaching moment.
It would have been, but then things are cumulative, and build on the past. Like, how can we expect the people of the past to know what we know today and build things for today based on the knowledge we have now?
Yeah,
we can't. The Pepe Le Pew is, when did, oh God, like the 20s or something like that?
Yeah, and how many people like stood trial for rape and were like, well, I saw this Looney Tunes cartoon once. And, I was just like, well, I guess that's okay, because Pepe Le Pew was like,
well, that's a good point.
Like, seriously, like how far are you going to take this bullshit? Like,
well, it's kind of the whole myopic view of things, that we view things through the lens of what we understand today, and assume that 100 years ago those people would understand what we know today. Well, it's like, think about, okay, culturally, societally, you can think about it that way, but I think about it from an engineering standpoint. At that point, we did not even understand, we didn't even have the germ theory. So doctors were like, well, I don't have to wash my hands, because why would a doctor's hands be dirty?
It's just a theory.
Conduct surgery on people and put my dirty ass hands right into somebody's gut. They did that.
And smoke a cigarette over
there. Yeah, smoke a cigarette. Oh, yeah. 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Salem cigarettes or something. Like, I mean, that was a thing. Like, and we think, oh, yeah. And we think that, like, we look at things as if they should know better. But should they? I mean, do you know better? Do you know everything there is to know? Do you know the future? Do you know 100 years from now how things are going to be? The lessons we're going to learn? Of course not. So how can you judge somebody 100 years in the past as if they should know what you know today? And that's the problem I have with that shit.
Yeah.
Well,
we're about to embark on a whole other episode, I think. So.
Yeah, probably, but I have to take a wicked piss.
Yes.
And I think that might be a yes. Yes. Do we have to do a Picard takes a piss episode?
We could just do a commercial break.
I think it might be a good point. We're like an hour and a half in right now.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's enough. There's only so much people can take. And I think that's a good point to end on.
Yes. So leave your comments. Tell us what you want us to branch off on and bitch about next. Yeah, whether it's cancel culture or going further into cultural appropriation or anything else, bullying or racism, whatever,
Yeah, and if you want to bitch at us for not knowing things, then go ahead. Be
Yeah, if
my
we're
guest.
just a bunch of privileged cis white males that obviously don't know jack shit because we're cis white males, then well, you're a bigot, but let us know.
Oh man. Yeah, well, hopefully we didn't burst your bubble. And if we did, well, have a good night, everybody.